Yemen has imposed an aerial blockade on Israel. And that's what the missile in Ben Gurion did. And then the Israelis announced with great bravado, oh, the airport was closed for a few hours and then it reopened. Well, they can reopen Ben Gurion Airport all they want, but no planes are coming in. Until April, most foreign airlines had canceled flights, canceled service to Israel. The vast majority of service was carried out by Israeli airlines and a few small European airlines. But most of the big carriers were not flying in and out. They only resumed those services on a regular basis a few weeks ago, and now they've stopped again. First, after the Yemeni missile operation, they said, oh, we're suspending flights for a few days. Now, major airlines, including British Airways, are announcing that they're suspending service at least until the middle of June. So you have to think about Israel demoralized, isolated, its economy is in collapse. Who is going to go and invest there? Who is going to go and build factories and businesses there? Who's going to go on vacation there other than, a few real extreme fanatics? And if you are an Israeli with a diploma and a foreign passport, you're going to be searching the job listings in countries that are going to be much safer for you and your family. And even the Israelis announced in their official statistics, record numbers of Israelis leaving and not returning. The experts we talked to at the Electronic Intifada live stream over the last few months, people like Shir Hever, say that these official figures represent probably only a fraction of the reality. But if the official figures are showing record numbers of Israelis leaving and not return, what must the real numbers be like? So what I'm saying is, if you look at the big picture, the utter horrors that Israel is committing, and which we must never stop talking about, never stop demanding an end to our government's complicity, never stop doing everything we can to protest them and to shame and hold accountable the officials in our governments who are enabling this. At the same time, that must not obscure for us the reality that this Zionist colonial project, this murderous implantation in our region, is on its way out.
Yeah, Lowkey, definitely want to get you in here. Any reactions to this? It makes me think, I feel like the United States has been experiencing Vietnam moment after moment in West Asia, but could this also be Israel's moment, even as brutal, as ugly as it is?
When the IRA attempted to assassinate Margaret Thatcher in Brighton and was not successful, it said, we only have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky every time. Now, the basis of this aerial blockade of the Zionist entity is that just one ballistic missile can get through and debilitate life as normal for Israel. And this is the lesson from all of this, that these are movements which have very limited means, but have achieved massive changes and gains in terms of disorientating the Zionist entity and its ability to do what it does in the region. You have to remember that after 1948, the Palestinians were supposed to disappear. At the time of the Nakba, there were only a few million Palestinians in existence. Today, there's over 12 million of them in existence. And that is a testament to this idea that Israel can kill, but it cannot win. That the very essence of Zionism in targeting the weakest among populations in order to spread fear and panic and move human beings and impose a different physical space on those people is not successful in achieving the ultimate aim, which is the complete eradication of the Palestinians and the expansion of Israel into other places. One thing I thought of when Ali was talking about this attempt to astroturf some form of political change in Gaza was actually about a year and a half ago that Israel's favorite spy, Mahmoud Abbas, said he's going to go to Gaza. And he said it will either be Nasr or Shahada, that he'll either be victorious or he'll get killed in his heroic mission. And this was one of many attempts that the Israelis have launched to try and impose a different regime on the Palestinians living in Gaza. And it's been very, very clear that the population, by and large, support resistance against Israel. You're not going to defeat people in the way that Israel has attempted to, and ultimately dampen their spirits. We are talking about people who are inspirations for the rest of humanity in their ability to assert life. So ultimately, Israel is, as a political idea, committing suicide. These are the death spasms of the Zionist project. And of course, it is going for scorched earth. And it is becoming, in the rest of the world, and on a daily basis, a more and more clearly seen anti-human ideology. I remember in 2009, for us to speak clearly about Zionism was seen and frowned upon by many. And today, Zionism in and of itself is really akin to the most horrific and brutal ideologies which have existed in documented human history. And that is a perception which is actually widely held. The word Zionist now is absolutely unambiguously completely synonymous with genocide, ethnic cleansing, and racism, the way we always said it was, the way it was from the very beginning. But now there is a widely held conviction on this issue among, I would say, a majority of humanity. And moreover, a majority of humanity are in support of resistance against it in a way that they have never, ever been before. And that is, as Professor Marandi said, it will be a decisive factor in the generations going forward. What you have done during this time will serve for future generations of your own family as either a mark of shame or a mark of pride. If they can look back and say that you played, it will be akin to those that look back and had relatives that were involved in all manner of extermination of people across the global south. The future generations of those families hang their heads in shame. They wish to disown their forefathers and their foremothers for the crimes that they committed. What is this arrogance that this implant in the region thinks that it's different from any other of the historical examples? Where does this arrogance come from to have the perception that they are somehow an exception to the rule? When you kill human beings en masse, history does not smile upon your memory. And in that, there is a self-defeating loop that the Zionist project is in, and it would always spiral in this direction. So I absolutely agree with what Ali just said.
Well, Professor Marandi, same question to you then. You know, is this the Vietnam moment for Israel, which by extension is also of the United States? Anything you want to follow up with what Lowkey said?
I think this is far worse than Vietnam for the Israeli regime. I believe that this is the beginning of the end. I have no doubt personally that the regime will not last. The United States was defeated in Vietnam, and it changed the United States until, sadly, Saddam Hussein foolishly invaded Kuwait and gave the United States an excuse at a time when the Eastern Bloc collapsed to defeat his army, He didn't fight, and he didn't allow the army to fight either. And the United States, as a result of that victory, and as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union, really dealt with the ghosts of Vietnam, and that made the United States far more arrogant. But for at least for a decade and a half, or a couple of decades after Vietnam, the United States was much more cautious in foreign policy. We saw that in Lebanon. We saw that elsewhere. So it had a huge impact on the United States. But this, I think, is far different. Let's look at this imperial power, or this tiny imperial power. Its only success was in Syria. It defeated it. It took huge swathes of land, and Syria has crumbled. But what else has it done? What has it caused? It is, in its arrogance, in its brutality, in its inability to think clearly, it has shown everyone that even if you submit, because the Syrian state, the Syrian regime, Jolani, is saying all the right things to appease the Israeli regime and the Americans. Have they removed the sanctions? No. What have the Israelis done? They continue to bomb the country. So it shows that if you quit the resistance, if you give up your arms, if you lose your arms, that doesn't matter. The regime will continue to strike. It will break your country into pieces. What is the result of that? And let's look at Lebanon. Sheikh Naim Qasim said very clearly, Hezbollah will not give up its arms. What happened after that? In the local elections, which I'm sure Ali has covered and Lowkey knows better than I, they swept the board in all the areas, in all the places that they contested. The resistance won the elections in all the areas where it was held. So despite the pressure from the Arab regimes that are supporting the current government in Beirut, despite the pressure coming from the West, and despite the fact that the Israeli regime is constantly murdering people in Lebanon. Yesterday, they murdered a member of Hezbollah. Today, they murdered a member of Hamas. They're violating the ceasefire. That shows also the truth about the United States. The United States is the guarantor of the ceasefire. The Israeli regime requested the ceasefire in Lebanon, and the United States was the guarantor. But the regime murders people, and the United States does nothing. There's no protection. So what does that prove? It proves that people in Lebanon, they continue to stand with the resistance. And the logic of the resistance today is stronger than it was ever before. Syria has proven that. The violations in Lebanon have proven that. The role of the guarantor has proven that. And Hezbollah is rearming. It's rebuilding as we speak. I can tell you that with confidence. The Israeli regime has overextended itself. In Syria, it's taking land, and it hasn't been able to leave northern Palestine alongside the Lebanese border, and now it wants to expand the operations, its genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza. This is not. This is very difficult for the regime. As Ali was saying, the soldiers, those who've been fighting, many of them are not going to come back. And those who have come back are, the morale is much lower than when it was a year and a half ago. Many lives have been destroyed. Many businesses have been destroyed. And the regime, of course, is despised across the world. This, I think, is the most important thing of all. That Israel, which used to be a regime which commanded respect, not because it was good, but because Western narratives dominated the world. A couple of years ago in China, I gave you the example of China. A couple of years ago in China, most people had no idea what was going on in Palestine. It was far away. And those who knew a bit, some of them were pro-Palestinian, some were pro-Israel. Those who were pro-Israel basically knew Israel as a country that was technologically advanced. It didn't know, that ordinary people didn't know much about the regime. Now people across the world know, thanks to the heroic work of electronic intifada, artists like Lowkey, yourself, others, Jews, American Jews, and in the electronic intifada, in gray zone, and across the board, young people, university students from all
be
faiths and
careful with
walks of
your
life.
praise, Dr. Marandi, although it's much appreciated. Now will be called Iranian-backed.
No, I condemn you simultaneously.
Thank you. Your condemnation is much appreciated.
So I really believe that the tide has turned, and let's look at the Israeli regime in Gaza, as I think Lowkey was saying, they were supposed to take Gaza in a month. Maybe Ali said it. We're approaching 19 months now, if I'm not mistaken. What have they done? Have they defeated the resistance? Hamas is still putting out footage. Islamic Jihad is still putting out footage. And we saw this major victory in Yemen. And also, as I said, as I want to allude to, look at the United States. The mood inside the United States is shifting. Young people are growing aware of the reality. People are waking up. If things like this are shifting in the United States, imagine how it is in the rest of the world, where people have more exposure to the truth. So, the United States is now, due to the foolishness of Trump, it's now confronting literally the world. It's a trade war. It's a trade war with China. It's a trade war with its own allies. It's antagonized Canada. It has antagonized Europe. It is continuing the war with Russia. This is all depleting the energy of the United States. It is fighting multiple wars, whether hot wars or cold wars or economic wars on multiple fronts. And we know that the Israeli regime is dependent on the power of the West. It's not a strong regime. Everything it has comes from the West. Even those missiles that were discussed earlier, the Iron Dome. Without the United States, there is no Iron Dome. That's where the money comes from for the research. That's how the Americans are behind the development. Everything that the Israeli regime has comes from the United States. A weaker United States is not good for the regime. And the Red Sea is a sign of that. So I believe, and one final point, and that is, look at the mood in the region. The Minister of Defense of Saudi Arabia comes to Iran and condemns the Israeli regime. For whatever reason it is, it shows that it is not good for anyone in this region to be seen as friendly to the regime. This will have consequences. Each extra day of genocide, each day that this Holocaust continues, there will be more hatred entrenched for the racism and for the brutality of this regime. The hatred will become deepened, both in this region and beyond. So I do not see this regime as surviving. I'm not saying that it will die tomorrow or next year, but I think it will collapse. And you see the internal struggle as well. It's something that we don't hear about very often. But if people follow the Hebrew press, and I'm sure the electronic intifada covers this extensively, you see that the divide in the regime is very deep. There are two Israels. It's the liberal Israel, which is just a genocidal, and it is the right-wing religious fanatical in a different way. But they hate each other. And this divide is also going to have consequences. So despite the bloodshed, despite the death and this, right, just today, I think we all saw the footage of another massacre. Over 25 people, I think, were murdered near a restaurant in Gaza. Children, entire families slaughtered, kids slaughtered, a young boy selling coffee to people to survive, to help his family survive, this murdered. that was just one instance. It's happening every day. It's happening 24 hours a day. Each and every one of these crimes is accumulating the hatred for the regime, and it is causing the hatred to have greater depth. The hatred towards this fanatical regime is something that I believe will not be reversed.